Well, we pretty well finished the lathe work on our hub, and this is what it looks like. This is the way it will set down into the Muller, is just like this. We've got our keys cut in the top, both in our shaft and in our hub, and we're drilled and tapped here. And what's going to happen, these are just to temporarily hold everything in place while I finish machining it in the lathe. These will be replaced with set screws. They're 3/8 coarse thread. We'll put a flat washer down in the recess there, and then we'll lock it with a nut on top. And we'll do that once we get ready for final assembly, or closer to final assembly. This will get fitted and put together and taken apart several times. We've got our key turned, or our keyway all the way down. We've got our key in there, and then this surface is where a seal goes on. So we've already got the seal. We polished this up well enough. We may do a little more final polish on it, but there's where our seal runs on the top. Bearing goes down next, one of our cone bearings, and then from the bottom another cone bearing comes up. And I haven't figured out exactly how I'm going to support the bottom of it, or affix the bottom of it. The main shaft is going to go in from the bottom up, and then our hub will set down on top, and we'll adjust our tension on top. It's tapped in the end of the shaft for 1/2 inch course right down in here, and we'll just put a stud on there at a la Steve Chastain that sticks up, a little square on the bottom or 2 flats on it, so it can be tightened in there and permanently affixed there. And then we'll draw it up with a big washer and a nut, and the big washer will be one of the drops that came out of the wheel hub. So kind of heavy. So what I probably am going to do is I may very well rework the bottom cast bearing holder that's on the bottom of the Muller shaft, and it's set up with the bearing race in it, one top, one bottom. They're both the same, and then there's a recess cut for a seal. I'm not sure I've got enough distance on the bottom of that recess. What I think I'm going to do to align and hold the bottom is I'm probably just going to put a ring on the shaft. Probably just going to put a ring on the shaft someplace in here, and I'm probably going to permanently weld it. But I think if I make it narrow enough, why I can go ahead. I've got another seal with a 2-inch ID on it that will fit in that race. I think I can counterbore my holder a little bit more, so that if I use a narrow stop here, basically, which will just be a ring, like I say, welded around on the bottom, I think I'll have enough room that I can slide that seal in from the bottom. Otherwise, I may just figure out some sort of a dust shield and just weld on the bottom or the top of that little stop that goes up against the bearing. It's on the bottom. It'll be relatively well protected, even though it will be a dirty environment. So we can always use a grease gun, put a zerd in here someplace to grease the bearings themselves, and we can always just put enough grease in there just to use that as a seal and force it out the bottom. It's a little bit messy, but that'll be fine there for that application. From there, I've got to figure the hub that goes on here someplace that's going to hold our great big gear, and that's our big gear that goes on there. It was, before I got that when I bought it, why it already had a fairly big center hole in it. So what I'll probably do is figure out a hub and then weld on a flange, basically, that will bolt to that bearing. That way it'll still be small enough I can spin it in the lathe to make sure it's running true and parallel, and then just bolt it to that gear is probably the plan. And then we can shorten this if we've got enough material. It's probably not going to hurt for this little extra to hang out in space. But anyway, we'll do whatever we need to do there. So I've got to figure that, and then the next thing will be figuring the arms that come out on the hub itself for the plows, and the support for the wheel itself. So that'll all be coming up, and I'll probably do a combination of those. I think I want to figure out how the shaft is going to sit in there and where before I start welding extra stuff onto the hub. So that'll probably be one of the next things, is figuring out how we're going to get our bearings and stuff set up in the main shaft in the Muller. So making progress there, and I drug the motor out. I've got a 5-horse motor that I had that was surplus to my machine, or surplus to my needs. Came off of a machine that we wore out over the last 20 years, but it's still got a good 5 horsepower motor. So I've got to get plugged for that right now just to check rotation, make sure it's going to rotate the right way, and everything's going to be set up. It's a single phase 5 horse and 1725 horse. So that's what we're going to power the mower with. Taking a little time today working on the spindle and the head for the sand muller. So this is the spindle, and it's machined. This is its positioning, the way it will sit in the mower itself, and we'll go out and assemble it here in a few minutes. But it's the sun's bright out there, so who knows what we're going to get for pictures. So what I've done is I've already had it installed, temporarily installed. The wheel heads are, yeah, the wheel head sits up here on top, aligns with this keyway, and it sits on like this, right there. So we've got a bearing on the top and a bearing on the bottom, 2 cone bearings, and this bearing will sit down against the bottom right down here, and we can go ahead and put it on because it will be, I'm not lubing these up yet because I'll have it parting together several more times. So that sits on there. This goes up into its matching cone on the bottom of the molar right there, on up through. This bearing, cone bearing, will go on top, and then the spindle head on top of it with a seal in between. Now I would have done a couple of things differently had I known then what I know now, but it'll work out fine. So I'll explain those when we get out there. So let's go out and see what we can come up with here. All right, well, this is all just a temporary fit at this point in time. So we've got our cone bearing on the bottom sitting against our, and this piece down here was just a piece of pipe that I went ahead and cleaned the inside up so it was a sliding fit. Went ahead and welded it in on the bottom, then turned the outside and trued up the inside in the lathe. So it sits in there like that. This sets up into the back end. Just like that. Now, while we got it here in this position, I've got a seal that sets on over here. Had I known then what I would know now, I would have cast this bearing housing, or this bearing carrier, which is the same top and bottom. I would have cast this one a little bit differently. I would have extended it farther so that the bearing race and the bearing set farther in there, and that left me a standard 2-inch shaft here on the back so that I could have mounted the seal right in there. What I'm going to end up and do is I'll probably have to do another casting, but I'll cast a little extension cap on this. It's going to have a hole in the center. We'll just screw it on in 3 or 4 places onto the existing housing, and it will carry a bearing. I don't know exactly how Steve Chastain originally did his to mount it up there, whether he didn't use a seal or I don't know what the deal is, but anyway, that's what I would do different on the bottom end. Otherwise, everything else looks good. So if we turn it around this way, so that we've got a better view of it. Yeah, that actually is a better view of it. Okay, if we have it here this way, our other bearing will go on here. And it sets in there. And our hub and the keys hanging in there. It sits on this way. We've got a seal that goes in there, and that seal fits in here. So this surface right here is riding against the inner race on the bearing. That will slide on there most of the way. And then to finish pulling it into position, we've got a big washer, which was a drop from, maybe it came out of the plates that we used to make our Muller wheel. And I think the way he originally assembled his was he had it in the upright position, so he was drawing the shaft up into the hub up here. So we'll be able to set our preload here just like this. And of course we don't have any grease in these yet, but that's all right. Okay, so there's our main hub, or our main spindle with our hub on it. Now what we're going to have, and I believe it's directly 180 degrees from our locking bolts here, will be the carrier that welds on there just like that. That's going to carry the two bearings and have the linkage in the axle come out for our Muller wheel. And I believe it sits over here. It may sit on this side, but anyway, so this gets welded right in the, pretty much right in the middle. So we're going to do that, and I think that's pretty much standard. We'll lay it out and do that. I'll figure out exactly where I want it, because I want it to be, I believe, pretty well centered with the wheel. So the wheels, I don't know, we'll figure out where that goes as we get there. But anyway, the next thing will be to weld this into position. I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera because I'm going to set the whole assembly back down in its proper positioning and then position where I want this. Then we'll tack it in place, disassemble it and weld it. Then on the 45 degrees off of it, I believe this is the mount for our other plow. I'm not sure if that pipe's going to be long enough. I'm not sure exactly how that goes on, but we'll lay that out and verify it. Here's the Muller head, main spindle's in. This is going to be the surface that holds the axle to allow the main plow wheel to raise and lower. It'll set this way, I believe. Rotation will be this way, so the wheel can float up and down. On here we'll have I believe the arm goes through here, and then there's a stop that sits on the top of this, so it raises and lowers there. So anyway, that's the way that goes. Now I've not greased any bearings yet, they're just set in here. But that's the way the head's going to go on. Now the next thing will be two plates, and I'm just going to get them tacked in place today probably. There's a plate on the top that sets up here like this, and then a one on the bottom. And the main plow comes off of it, and then there'll be side plates installed, of course. Now this calls for 8 1/4 inches long from center to out to the end of here. I've left it a little bit long. I've left it to about 10 inches, and I may go back and trim it. I'm going to set everything in place and make sure the plows are where I think they should be and all that good stuff. So the next thing is just going to be, I'm going to go ahead and pull this head out of here, and then we'll tack these in place, or we'll start welding them up. Well, here's our hub to this point in time. Now we'll take and we'll fill in the sides. Actually, I'll probably go back in with wire feeder and wire feed inside these. I just tigged them because it was a little bit cleaner around the outside, and I needed the practice. But that's the way it's going to lay out. Just about like that. We'll put plates here and we'll plate it on down. But before I do that, I think I'll go ahead, finish setting up my plows and figure out how they're going to sit. Make sure we've got them where they need to be. And then once I get that welded on, and I've got the plates for the outside. These are going to be the 4 plates for the adjustable plows. Steve Chastain originally just built 2 of them with adjustable plates. I think on the main plow, I'm going to use adjustable plates on both the main plow and on the secondary plow. And the way this sits on there, there'll be spacers in between. I've got to finish cutting these. These are just cut out of plate. So the way they'll go on here is something in that orientation. I don't know exactly where they sit, you know, like if they go clear to there, what the deal is. But anyway, we'll figure out where we want those adjustable plows, and they'll bolt up. And then we'll figure out exactly what length we want this. So there we are for the day.